What I'm really excited going forward for the blockchain industry is actually for blockchain tech to fade into the background. Приветик, меня зовут Iliana Oris Valiente, я сейчас живу здесь в Торонто и работаю в Accenture. Hola, buenos días, mi nombre es Iliana Oris Valiente, yo estoy aquí en Toronto, en Canadá, y estoy trabajando con Accenture. My childhood was unusual in the sense that I was born in Russia, but I spent time growing up in Cuba and then going back to Russia. You could not ask for two countries that are more diverse from a climate standpoint, from the coldest of the cold to the warmest of the warmest, to a culture, to the language and everything in between. And so what I remember as a child was actually being confused. That was probably the best way of characterizing it, because just as you're getting used to one culture, one set of environment, one set of people, bam, you're transplanted somewhere else and into a new school system and the need to essentially relearn the language. And so I learned very early on the skills of resiliency and adaptability. So in a way, my Canadian immigration story is so similar to just the traditional Canadian immigrant story of you come here, you really don't have any connections. I didn't speak the language. My parents only spoke a little bit of English. I learned my first words in English on the airplane because I wanted to order something to drink. And my mother said, "You're only going to order something if you can order it in English." And I said, "Well, I don't speak English." She said, "Well, you're going to learn. Here's your dictionary." And so I pretty much learned English by reading the dictionary. And when we came here, it was the classic rags story of we're sleeping on the floors on the winter coats that we had because we didn't have a mattress in the crummiest part of the cheapest part of the city where, you know, you may have had a couple of mice floating around and some other insects. And my dad delivered pizzas and my mother cleaned office buildings. I mean, they have nuclear engineering and chemical electrical engineering backgrounds. And so it forces you to grow up very quickly. But I mean, I wouldn't trade my childhood and growing up for anything because it's really molded me into who I am today. My first memory related to the blockchain space was when a friend of mine approached me and said, "Hey, are you paying attention to this whole Bitcoin thing?" And I hadn't been. And he proceeds to say, "But I know how much you travel. And I remember you telling me a story of how you always have foreign currencies that you keep in a little Ziploc bag when you come back from your travels. So you come back from Switzerland, you have extra Swiss francs, you put them in a Ziploc bag and you put them in a drawer, saying the next time I go to Switzerland, I will remember to bring this with me." Unfortunately, the next time you go to Switzerland, you're accidentally rerouted from the UK and you didn't get a chance to go back home. And so you're like, whoops, I'm kind of taking currency out of circulation. Please don't report me. And so because I was always doing that travel and complaining about the foreign currencies, I was like, oh, a global currency that is ready-made for the internet? Well, this seems interesting. And because of my background coming from the Russian regime and the Cuban regime, where I've seen how frail monetary policy can be when it's controlled by a nation state, it felt to me like a hedge into a hedge to opt into a different monetary and a different governance system. And so it deeply resonated with me as something that was worth exploring. But the second aha for me really came because of my professional experience. At the time, I had finished my chartered accountancy designation. I had experience in tax, I had experience in audit. And when I was working in corporate finance, I realized, you know, my whole career thus far has been so oriented in terms of ledgers and looking at what does one set of books say, what does another set of books say, and how do you compare the two of them. And if blockchain is really about distributed ledger tech, is that going to be pretty significant as a step change for the accounting industry, for the auditing profession? And so suddenly my interest was piqued because it wasn't just a personal interest and curiosity. I thought, wait a second, this is going to have a pretty broad systemic impact, and this is worth paying attention to. And it was that second insight that really propelled me into working in this industry. What I'm really excited going forward for the blockchain industry is actually for blockchain tech to fade into the background. For most people, they have no idea how the internet actually works. They don't know really what a browser is or how an email arrives in their inbox. All they know is that an email arrived in their inbox and it tells them that there's a task that they now need to do, and they can use the internet to communicate with other people. I think for the blockchain industry to be successful, we have to push the back-end technology pieces into the background and really focus on what is the user experience, what is the application, what is the so what new features does this tech enable for an average everyday consumer. There's a general trend I'm paying close attention to around borderlessness of individuals as well as borderlessness of businesses. During the pandemic, we all experienced the work from home shift. There is a rising number of people who are reevaluating their lives and saying, wait, why is it that I live in this city or that I live in this country? Is it because I was born here? Is it because you were moved there with your family and you never really thought to pick up and leave? Now people are starting to realize that, wait, the world is your oyster, and no longer do you need to limit yourself to living in just one city or one country 365 days of the year. Some people really love that rootedness, the routine, the stability, the consistency. Others thrive when you have an element of novelty and variety. I've literally been designing an entire theory around this that I'm calling the potted plant theory. The potted plant theory, this idea that you can take people and you can plot them along a spectrum. On the one side of the spectrum, you have sequoia trees. If you wanted to transplant a sequoia tree, you wouldn't be able to. It's physically impractical. But you move along the spectrum to a slightly smaller tree, a red maple. You can actually transplant a red maple, but you need the help of an arborist. End the spectrum with your plants. Either through water or fertilizer to get across two dimensions. On the one side, you have your need for certainty. On the other, you have your need for novelty. The other matrix line is your need for resources. This model works well for who you are at the core. Where do you think you fall on the spectrum? Where do you think your employees fall? What is this need for the policies, the procedures within your organization? This is the framework that I'm hoping people will interest in. And so borderless business, and supported by a lot of the Web3 technology stack and Web3 powered payments mechanisms, to me, is a bit of a no-brainer of one of the future evolutions. I think it's a completely untapped market. One of the major strengths that immigrants bring to the table is versatility and adaptability. You've already shown that you can operate in more than one environment, and therefore you can act as a translator between worlds. I think that the blockchain space has a lot of room for people who can play that translation role between worlds, because right now we're in a model that generally supports and prioritizes and rewards deep specialists in one area. I strongly believe that generalists play a hugely important role in the world, especially now with the rise of AI, because suddenly you need people who can connect the dots across disparate seeming concepts. That has been at the core of my career. And I think for those who have immigrated at one point in their life, it's probably an underappreciated skill that they have, but they can already connect dots that maybe somebody who's had one very traditional life cannot. So I would encourage them to lean in to that strength and find a way of marrying it to a gap that they're seeing or an area of interest that they're seeing within the Web3 ecosystem. When I think about my immigrant journey, the words that come to mind are growth and resilience and adaptability and new possibilities and new frontiers, and really getting comfortable with who you are and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone into the person that you can become. What I would tell listeners is that as an immigrant, as whatever your background is, lean into who you are. There's only one version of you. You have your unique strengths, you have your unique perspective, and don't try to downplay it. Don't try to fit yourself into the mold, because you're actually doing the world a disservice. The more you lean into who you are, the better your outcomes will be. That's certainly been the case for me, where I've often felt out of place pretty much everywhere I went. In Siberia, I was the only little kid that looked like me with my afro. My hair is naturally very curly as opposed to the straight style today. And so you look at a place and you try to blend in. And in Canada, I tried to blend in. And I was like, why? The less you blend in, the better your results. So just go be you. Go live a custom-made life that makes sense for who you are as a human.